Byron Donalds is a Republican U.S. representative for Florida, and he joins me now. Congressman, welcome to the show.
It's good to be with you. Actually, real quick, I'm a big fan. I love the show, love the pod. I've been listening for a while, so this is actually pretty exciting for me. Okay, I'm going to stop being a fanboy. We can get to it now.
Thank you. No, go on. No, thank you so much. I appreciate it. So, I mean, I hate to make the whole show about James Comey, but I just thought it was such a petty moment that embodied so much of what we're seeing on the left. Glee because they hate Trump so much and have the Trump derangement syndrome without being able to see beyond it to what this just did to the United States of America.
I mean, look, unfortunately, this is where we are. You know, we have a situation in our country where we become heads I win, tails you lose. And who really loses are the American people. So for him not to be able to, do his job and actually look at the facts as they are, look at the law and then make a determination, he's still caught up in his petty grievances with Donald Trump, the individual, as opposed to looking at the fabric of not just criminal justice in America, but just the law in general in America. This is the same guy who went out in 2016 and said, no reasonable prosecutor would bring charges, even though everybody knew that Hillary Clinton violated the Espionage Act. It was clear as day. He's the no reasonable prosecutor guy. I guess in his mind, Alvin Bragg is reasonable, but in nobody else's.
Mm-hmm. The media glee was in your face on every channel, and I searched them all. And the overreach, I don't know if you caught any of the body language analysis that some people were doing we only got still shots of Trump inside the courtroom. They let a couple of still photographers go in there. And of course, that didn't stop CNN from going there. Here is some of that, SOT 14.
Seeing that wide shot where he is at the defense table and you see the court police, he's in custody, he's in their control, I think is very striking.
His body language, hunched over, hands clasped between his legs, that is an angry Trump.
And he's forced today to live in reality. We're reading body language right now. Pretty soon we'll get to read an indictment. This has to be a thud for him because he lives in a fantasy land.
He looked really irritated and annoyed. That is a pissed off Donald Trump.
I mean, okay, right? This is where they're going to go. But they're drunk on the Trump wine again already. And this is what we're going to get. The next court appearance is in December. Now through December, is this how it's going to be?
Unfortunately, yeah. Look, a couple things. One, the media need their ratings, and ratings goal for them has always been Donald Trump. Let's just be perfectly clear. A lot of the big media, they are corporations. As much as the left loves to decry profits, the big media make big profits off of scandalized news coverage because it keeps eyeballs on the coverage. This is what they're going to do. And we're going to see more of it, not just through the next court date, which is December or January, but frankly, throughout the rest of the presidential cycle. Number two, the people who are describing it as, oh my gosh, he's leaned forward with clenched hands. Have they ever seen Donald Trump sit in any meeting? I mean, look, take any White House, any Oval Office meeting. What's he doing? Leaning forward, hands clasped together in front of him. That's his normal posture anyway. And the last piece is, what American wouldn't be pissed? You're sitting in front of a judge on trumped up foolishness, no pun intended. And you realize you're being taken to the woodshed simply because the prosecutor doesn't like you, and you're going to sit there with a smile on your face. I mean, these guys are silly.
I was listening to Brick Hume yesterday, and he was talking about how the average American is dealing with rising inflation and their own financial issues and concerned about what's happening with Ukraine and China and so on. And they look up, they see this aged 82-year-old almost president who can't even put two sentences together when he's on cam. I think the Democrats and these media who are just so gleeful about this are misunderstanding how the average person at home sees this. I have friends who marched against Trump, marched against him, texting me that they're ready to donate to his campaign. They're so mad. They can see what's being done to him. And, this is on the heels of so many targeting instances of targeting of Trump. We could go through, obviously, the whole list of Russiagate and the double indictments and everything they've done and the numerous lawsuits. I mean, Alvin Bragg bragging about being part of over 100 lawsuits that the AG's office filed against Trump and Trump Organization and Trump and his family. And that's not including what's happening now with this latest indictment, what's going to happen in Atlanta, what's going to happen in the special prosecutor's office in Washington, D.C. I mean, it's so much. They're making a victim out of the guy they wanted to be seen as the villain. I mean, Do you think they're in danger of overplaying their hand or have already?
I think they've already overplayed their hand, and I don't think they're going to stop because the radical elements of the Democrat base want this. They thrive on this. And let's be very clear, for the Democrat Party, they're in a catch-22. They have to try to go after Trump to motivate their base. But in the process of doing that, you elevate Trump. And so you're in this, not even a part of, well, maybe he did it, maybe he did. You're in a mean-spirited argument. You're in an un-American argument. You're in a turning the legal system on its head to go after your political enemy's argument. And that puts them in a very terrible position. But Megyn, let's remember one thing. In 2016, Hillary Clinton funded a fake dossier to go after Donald Trump. In 2020, the media, by the way, what Alvin Bragg is accusing Donald Trump of, he might as well accuse big media of, because they suppressed information about Hunter Biden in the middle of that presidential election, the 2020 election. And by the way, FEC came out with a ruling that said this is not an in-kind contribution from media, although you could argue that was by far the largest in-kind contribution ever conceived of in politics. And now 2024, you have Alvin Bragg and these DAs in his various jurisdictions. So what you're actually seeing is Democrat interference in elections by suppressing information or shoving new information into the field, which distracts from the things that actually do matter to the American people: our economy, our border, our security, foreign policy, the things that the federal government should actually be focused on and doing.
And it's like, you look at what they're coming after him for in these 3 potential investigations, one that's resulted in an indictment in New York. It's really about paperwork. You didn't fill out the right papers revealing what those payments were for. That's really Alvin Bragg's case. You wrote down the wrong thing in your ledger. And I really care about ledgers in Manhattan because we're the financial capital of the world. He's on camera. That's what he's saying. That's his case. Then there's Washington, D.C. What is that special prosecutor Jack Smith worried about? Trump and documents. You didn't keep the proper documents. You didn't satisfy the little national archivist, who was definitely a Trump hater, who didn't decide to do this with any other president, try to go through and see exactly what had been returned and what hadn't. That guy wasn't satisfied. And then Trump apparently didn't turn over all the documents. It's hard to feel the heartstrings swell on documents. And even the Fulton County, Georgia one is about Trump in a phone call where he was saying, find me the votes, which is very ambiguous and honestly can be spun either way. So it's tough, to get people emotionally behind you, which you need to, given the context here, with documents and a one-liner on a phone call.
Well, I think, look, for Democrats, this will be the second time they try to get Trump on a phone call. I mean, that's what the first impeachment was about, a phone call. That was stupid, too. You're right. This stuff is so thin, and it's deranged at this point. Donald Trump's not president right now. He's not been running the country for, 2.5 years in now? Joe Biden's been president. Yes, he's coming back. He wants to run. He wants to finish the job that he started. But they are so deranged on this stuff. And frankly, it's almost like Stockholm syndrome. Like, it's like they can't live with them. They can't live without them. It's a very weird place to be in. But the fact of the matter is that policy and how you're actually going to manage the country, those are the things that really matter to the voters at the end of the day. What this is for them to try to find those emotional chords to drive turnout. I mean, it's not something we're talking about, but yesterday, you had the election in Wisconsin, the election in Chicago. What the Democrats are doing there is using emotion to drive those elections. That's what they're doing here with Donald Trump. They're trying to use the emotions to drive their turnout, because if you look at their policy and what they stand for, what they really want to accomplish, man, nobody wants to deal with that. That stuff is crazy. But that's what they have to do in order to get electoral success.
Can you believe Chicago went farther to the left?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable to me that they had a relatively reasonable candidate right there for the taking. They rejected that candidate and now have gone more left than they had under Lori Lightfoot. How? Given the crime stats there, how?
Because elections are part policy, but they're really emotional creatures. And I didn't really follow that mayoral race. But if you were going to ask me like how they kind of pulled it together, I think it's Brandon, I forget his last name. Doesn't really matter right now.
Johnson.
That he's the new wave of leadership. He's going to make things better, even though his policy set is going to make things far worse. And I think obviously the electorate in Chicago is largely Black, largely African-American. Look, you got to understand, there is a sense of pride for Black people to see somebody leading their city. That's an emotional tie. That is a matter of pride for the Black community. But at the end of the day, policies matter. Like, I can have pride in you, but if my kids can't walk down the street to go to school, that's a tragedy for my own family. And my hope is that the voters in Chicago begin to see through this. But unfortunately, Chicago is going to take the same walk that San Francisco has taken. My former city of New York has already taken.
Yep. Baltimore, we could go down the list. In the meantime, I spoke about how it's tough for people to emotionally connect on document management and a one line in a phone call. In times like this, it is a big day. Yesterday was a very big day for America. You look to the commander-in-chief, to our presidential leadership to set the tone. Somber. Had I been advising him, I would have said, you can comment on it, stay somber, tip of the hat to the people who are pained right now because they understand this is a before and after moment. Don't be gleeful. And make some larger statement about how America will get through it. That's what I would have advised. Here's what happened instead. Take a listen, SOT 16.
Is the indictment of your predecessor politically divisive?
Okay. So what they said was, is the indictment of your predecessor politically divisive? He understood what they were yelling at him because they were all yelling the same thing. He just smirked and smiled. Didn't really say anything. Karine Jean-Pierre was also asked about it. Here's how she handled it.
Biden is a lawyer. Is he
and the President of the United States and the Commander-in-Chief, but go ahead.
He is, but as a lawyer, is he concerned at all that a local DA indicting a former president could, down the line, open up the possibility, set the precedent, that local DAs that don't like former President Biden could indict him?
I'm not going to comment from here.
Why don't you have more to say about the Trump indictment?
It is an ongoing case, and I've been very clear about that. We've been prudent about that, not commenting on ongoing cases, and we're going to stick to that.
So that's a lie. That's a lie. Any case involving, police and a Black defendant, in which case, there was violence, or they weighed in every single time. But this one, they want to act like they're above board, and there's absolutely no tone setting for the country from the commander-in-chief himself.
Well, look, I'm going to do some body language analysis. Shout out to Bill O'Reilly on the old show. They would bring that segment. I actually like that segment. It was pretty cool.
That was a good segment.
Here's what I will tell you. What you see from Karine Jean-Pierre and from Joe Biden is smugness. It is a smug look on their faces, like they're doing our work for us, and we're just going to sit back in the catbird seat and watch it all unfold. And I think that smugness is really going to come back to bite them. Because no matter how you feel about Donald Trump, what you don't want to see is this political persecution of people. Like, look, and some people, the Democrats will say, oh, but Donald Trump said, to lock up Hillary Clinton. Okay, yeah, he definitely said that. He said that in a speech many, many times, many, many rallies. Megyn, you've covered it. But he didn't turn his Department of Justice loose on Hillary Clinton. That never happened. He didn't send the word out to local DAs around the country to say, hey, now's the time, go get Hillary Clinton. That never happened. And so I think it's important for the president to understand that our country has to be able to still be a united country, which is becoming harder and harder as the days go by after the next presidential election. That's something that all presidents have to make sure that they guard carefully. Joe Biden's been a disastrous president. Who cares if the activist DAs have left him alone? Who cares if they have not looked into the fact that his family has been getting millions of dollars from the Chinese? The truth of the matter is that our border is wide open. Our economy is a mess. Foreign policy is a mess. We're leading from behind. Americans are not in the position they're supposed to be in, and he's only going to make it worse. The second thing I would say, and this is just more on a practical side, it'll be very difficult for the Alvin Bragg or anybody else to have this case with a sitting president of the United States. I think the American people are going to look through this for what it is. A lot of this is going to depend on how if it is Donald Trump as the nominee, how he manages that situation through the November election and how the radical left responds to this. Because that's going to be one of their key talking points. They're going to keep pressing that point. But it's essentially like saying, how can you say I'm not qualified when the person coming after me is you? It's not like it's just normal people coming after me. It's you crazy people are coming after me. And you're trying to use that to say that now I'm not qualified to hold the highest office in the land, which, by the way, I've already done once, and I did the job better than you.
It's crazy because it's really like your bullies. Your bullies have punched you repeatedly. You got a couple bumps and bruises, but you're still standing. And then the bullies want to say, look at all the bumps and bruises on him. Do you really want to elect him? And they run a real risk of the electorate saying, we understand how those bumps and bruises got there, and we respect the man for still standing. Congressman Byron Donalds, please come back. I'd love to have a longer talk. I'd love to do an in-depth profile on you, your whole history and your run. It's all been fascinating.
Well, listen, anytime, I would love to come back. Love the podcast, like I said, and looking forward to listening to more.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All the best. We're going to be joined by our friends from Ruthless, and we'll take a deep dive into other things, the media. Stand by.